welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an incredible guest, Scott White. Scott is the chairman and CEO of Spectra, a full-service multifamily apartment investment, development, acquisition, and management firm. He is also the chairman of Invesque, a public real estate investment company that specializes in healthcare and senior living property investments throughout North America. Previously, Scott held positions on Wall Street for over 13 years. In addition, Scott graduated with the highest honors in political science and journalism from Rutgers University. He also earned his MBA from Rutgers University and would then go on to earn a law degree from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. I am not done yet. He is a #1 Amazon best-selling author of The Life is Too Short Guy and a happiness and positivity keynote speaker. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Scott White.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Well, thanks so much, Scott, for coming on. I have to let you know, I wanted to make sure that I brought my A game with energy today because I knew I was going to have a conversation with Mr. Positivity today.
Let's do it. Let's have some fun.
All right, so let's go ahead. I do want to give a shout out to Stephen Pivnik for the introduction to you. And I would just like to let our listeners know, if you're tuning in for the first time, this podcast embodies the life lessons we learn along the way, all those sport experiences and career experiences. So Scott, if you could please start off with a brief introduction and background.
Well, I don't know what else to add. You just covered the vast majority of the bio. There's not much else that's interesting. Look, the most interesting part is that I'm married to my high school sweetheart. I have 2 daughters that are in college right now, and I am enjoying, loving, living the empty nest life. So, born, bred, raised in New Jersey, and everything else I think you covered.
That's wonderful, Scott. And thank you for that introduction. I love talking about the lessons we learn growing up in our childhood, maybe the lessons that our parents instilled in us to bring us to present day. And obviously, you have certainly reached the top of business and athletics. So as you stand here today and you reflect, is there maybe a lesson or several lessons that you learned in your childhood that would help you propel yourself to success present day?
I think the most important thing that I probably learned growing up, which has nothing to do with business or athletics, is really the importance and power of family. I was very blessed and fortunate that my parents were around. They saw me grow up. They're involved in everything I did. My dad was, career was really unimportant to him. It was a means to an end, so to speak, not necessarily an end unto itself. And he was the kind of guy that went to work super early, didn't take much of a lunch break, maybe a few minutes, and was walking in the door at 4:10 every day. There was no late. There was no, of course, this was long before email and night work and whatever. So at 4:10, that was it. I had dad home, and I have distinct memories of that as a young kid. And my mom didn't work until probably, I don't know, I must have been maybe middle school, maybe something along that line. So she was around too. And my brother and I were their whole lives. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We were everything to them. And I think it really instilled a sense of family and the importance of family and prioritizing family. So it's got nothing to do with work or sports, but that's probably the thing I remember most growing up.
No, most certainly. And I have to agree that family is certainly everything. I mean, just having a strong support system, as well as, something I just heard you say, though, the work ethic that your father had and the influence perhaps it had on you. I was just curious, the drive and determination at such a young age, all those degrees that you would go on to get and before you even started your career, did that stem from the influence and the work ethic your father had in you?
I don't know. It's an interesting question that I've grappled with quite a bit personally, in that it's really not who my parents were. I mean, my parents weren't about my dad kind of barely made it through college at night, and my mom never went to college. Neither was worried about their career path or all the things that we talk about in terms of working hard and the accolades and the credentials and all that. It wasn't them. It really wasn't them. So I'm not sure where that came from.
Yeah.
Obviously, there were influences all across my life that weren't just my parents, but I don't know if I'd attribute that to my parents.
That's so interesting because, like I said, just doing the research for this conversation, right from the beginning, I just saw the drive and determination to achieve success at the highest level. Like, it's one thing to go through your degrees, but reaching the highest honors in political science and journalism, that just really stood out to me.
Thank you.
So, absolutely. And so, as we move forward, I want to get straight into your book. So exciting. I want to reiterate. So you are a #1 Amazon best-selling author of The Life is Too Short Guy, also known as Litsick. So if you could maybe provide the audience, if they have not yet read the book, what influenced you or perhaps persuaded you to begin writing this book?
So it was one of those bucket list things. I always wanted to write a book, but I never had an idea really about what. I grappled with a bunch of different ideas, but nothing really resonated or stuck with me. It sat on my proverbial bucket list, to-do list for a long time. And then during COVID, I hired an executive coach. I'm a big believer in constant improvement and constant learning. So I hired an executive coach, who's probably my second one. And the first call we did was a get to know you. I answered a lot of questions, and then I think he gave me some, the Myers Briggs type tests and other tests like that after the first call. Then we get on the call the second time. The second call, it was again during COVID. It's on Zoom, and exactly like this. I remember his name is Kevin. He's like, "Dude, you're like Mr. Life is Too Short guy. Oh my God, everything's rah rah. Get it done today." And I was like, yeah, I guess so, but I never thought of it that way. Like it wasn't a persona that I could have defined. It's just who I am. So that night I mentioned it to my wife, and as I mentioned before, I'm very blessed, and the greatest thing I have in my life is I've been with my wife since high school. So I mentioned to her that I met this guy Kevin today. I'm going to be working with him, and he called me the Life is Too Short guy, and somehow the light bulb went off for her, and she's like, maybe that's your book. And foolishly, I was like, that's stupid. I mean, what is that going to be about? But of course, she planted that seed, and she told me a long time, and she watered that seed. And over the next couple of weeks, she'd ask me about it, and I started writing a little bit, a very little bit, a couple of notes, an outline, and then I stopped. And then a year later, I circled back and really embraced it and started writing. I didn't have a plan. I didn't wake up and say, "All right, I'm going to be the Life is Too Short guy, and here's the book." It really evolved. And I think what it is a reflection of who I am. It's not to explain the book, it's really a life philosophy on trying to make every day the best day ever, on the cross section between positivity and urgency and understanding life doesn't last forever. And it's really written as a very approachable, practical, simple guide. Like it's not an academic thesis. It's not, yes, there's some academic support and some research that went into it, but by design, I went out of my way. I really worked hard to make it very approachable, very accessible, very user friendly, and really just a reflection of who I am.
No, that's wonderful. And my next question is, did you realize the amount of like impact it would have like right now? I mean, you received numerous awards with this book already. And I'm just curious what your thoughts were as you were writing, as it would, of course, be published and then receiving all these awards. Was that something that you kind of foresaw, like
No,
with it being positivity?
not at all. Not at all. It's amazing to think about the journey and where I ended up. So the journey was I want to write a book. That was it. That was the journey. It wasn't necessarily sell books. It wasn't necessarily speak about it. It wasn't necessarily
Mhm.
win any awards. I want to write a book. And then as I got into it, and that's what I'm really proud of, and I mentioned before, is this wasn't all right, we're going to do this research and we're going to create this. This was my life philosophy. And as I started explaining it and realizing it, I got energized. It went from a challenge to a passion to an obsession. And now where it's come out is So the accolades and the awards are lovely, but not that they're not transformative. What has happened to me, and it's been probably one of the greatest things in my life, and I mean that sincerely, I don't say that lightly, is the feedback and reactions I've gotten from either speaking or from the book. People that send me notes, texts, emails, LinkedIn messages, whatever the case may be. I read your book and I decided to buy a plane ticket to go visit my mom. I hadn't seen her in years and realized, what you're saying. I joined a church choir after reading your book. I started writing a manuscript for a play that I've always thought of doing. Just yesterday, I spoke to an organization and someone came up to me afterwards and said, thanks for that reminder. While you were speaking, I actually texted some friends and said, let's go bowling tonight, because you reminded me of the importance of social interaction, the importance of why wait for tomorrow. I could go on for the next hour, which I won't because I'll put you to sleep, of sharing all this feedback, which has been really amazing for me, really moving to I heard from high school friends that I hadn't heard from in 30 years that were like, oh my God, I can't believe this. It's really opened my eyes and made me think differently. And that's really, I think, as I look back on what I've accomplished with this, that's what I want more than anything. I'd love one of your listeners to take away something positive from this and to have a positive impact on that person. And if it turns out that there are dozens or hundreds or thousands, that's fantastic, but it's bonus. If I could impact one life a day, it's fantastic.
Now that's wonderful. And this particular book, is it written for a certain age group? Is there a certain maturity level that should tune into it and read it?
So it's very broad. It really is. And unfortunately, you say that to people, they don't identify. Like, all right, very broad. It's for everybody, which basically means it's for nobody. But when you think about it, it's really about embracing each day. It's like I said, the intersection of positivity and urgency. It's a practical guide to, okay, I need to smile more. I need to think differently. I need to put on a different lens. There's almost no one I could think of that it wouldn't be suitable for. There's probably some, young, I have spoken in elementary school classrooms, so I can deliver the message to elementary schools. I'm not sure an elementary school kid could read it and take away the value. Sure. But certainly high school and above. And in fact, just yesterday I spoke to, like I was mentioning, in a college classroom, and the professor said afterwards, oh my God, we need this across our university. Like, this is what these students are grappling with. This is what they're struggling with. They're trying to understand their place in the world. They're trying to, I wish, he even said to me, I'd love for you to come speak to our faculty. Oh my God, grumpy old faculty would love to hear this kind of stuff, right? So there's almost an audience that I can't think it would be appropriate for.
No, that's absolutely wonderful. And as we move forward, just with the book itself, when you were in the process of writing it, you mentioned a certain level of negativity that you began to see, and you back it up by really insightful research. So I was curious, when did you start maybe seeing negativity that would obviously catch your attention to then write it at the beginning of the book, and why you would obviously write the rest of the book? So what was your thoughts on the negativity?
I've noticed it for a long time. Again, it gets back to this is who I am. This wasn't I'm going to write a book, I'm going to go research it and come up with a philosophy. This is just who I am. Had you known me 15 years ago, you would have said, yep, that's Scott White. I got it. So I have often noticed the negativity, and I've often called people out on it. I mean, to a certain degree, I drive my family nuts. And I'm like, is it really that bad? I mean, come on. And I think they will sometimes get frustrated. Yes, sometimes things are bad. Get over it, dude. But I could find a positivity in anything. You give me any fact pattern, the worst possible fact pattern, and it could always be worse.
No, absolutely. And in your book, the foundation of the Litzig philosophy is built on 10 principles. So when you were developing these 10 principles, what were, maybe we could just talk about like 2 or 3 that really resonated with you?
So the principles really are a way of defining the way I think. So it wasn't, again, had we met 5 years ago, you would have said, what are your 5 core principles of life? And I would have been like, oh, I don't know. I never thought of it that way. When I put pen to paper and I started to summarize how I think, Look, the foundational one, the thread that you pull through the whole thing is attitude is everything, the power of positivity. Attitude is everything, the power of positivity. And I give some statistics in there. I try not to get too carried away with the statistics because it generally puts people to sleep. But I give some statistics and anecdotes in there about how much of our attitude that we actually can control and the impact it has on the way we view the world. And I provide some tools and some examples for how you could look at the same exact fact pattern entirely differently. One example I gave, I remember, is so as you mentioned, I ran a public company for a while, and one of the things I would do on a regular basis is the first day of the month send out a short email, nothing really long, of state of the company, state of what's going on. So February 1st of 2022, I did this as an experiment. I sent out an email that if you got, you'd probably want to quit. You'd be like, why would I work for this guy? I was pretty much, life's miserable. It's cold. It's dark. It's February. Our company's stuck. We don't even have an office because we were changing offices. Like, what a crummy place and what a crummy life. And then 10 minutes later, I sent out another email. It says the best day of my life. I'm grateful to be a part of this team, the opportunity set. We're about to move into a new office, which is going to be just amazing. And what I did is, and it took a while, I'll tell you, I used the exact same word count. And that was the whole point I was trying to demonstrate to people is I could take the same day and the same facts and use two entirely different lenses and deliver it, same medium. It came through email, same word count. By the way, it took a while to get those word counts to match exactly. But that's an example of attitude is everything, the power of positivity. I think that's the common through line through the book. If I had to pick another one, it's hard to, this is like, which is your favorite child? It depends on what day you ask me.
Sure.
So I'm not sure what the other favorite one. I think one that I have found most compelling and one that I guess I went through life knowing but never really latched onto was Can't Make It Alone. So Can't Make It Alone refers to the interconnection and the power of social networks. And this is one of the few times that most of the chapter is about academic research. By the way, it's not that boring, so don't let your eyes glaze over yet. But it refers to the Harvard study of what makes a good life, which is just an absolutely amazing, compelling study for your listeners that aren't familiar with it. It's a study that started back in the late 1930s, and it's still going today. So we're talking about 90-ish years later. It started with a group of about 250 Harvard sophomores that they identified and wanted to study on what makes a good life. That's what they set out for, what makes a good life. And then added in 450 or 460 non-Harvard inner city Boston area youth. They took this entire cohort of about 700-ish participants and followed them the rest of their lives. So they did regular surveys, interviews, physical exams, psychological assessments. The original participants, their children, their grandchildren. Just think about the massive amount of data available. I know that you have an academic mind, an academic training professor. Just think about how much data is in there and how many conclusions you could draw. And the quintessential conclusion, it all comes down to the power of social networks. What makes a good life? The power of social networks. And one of the things that I love, especially as somebody that recently crossed over the half-century mark, those at age 50 that self-identified as having the strongest social networks, 30 years later at age 80, were the physically healthiest, psychologically, think about dementia, healthiest, and the happiest. Think about that. There's a greater correlation. So again, this is as far as I go academically, because beyond this, I fall off the edge of the cliff. But the correlation between strong social network and positivity, happiness, health, mental health was the strongest, and less so in terms of predisposition for disease, predisposition for dementia. Think about how compelling and powerful that is. So what's the message? We got to invest time, energy, and resources in building our social network. That doesn't mean going online and inviting a lot of friends and likes and posting a picture that everyone gives you a thumbs up and a smiley face on. That's not what that means. What it means is having a compelling, powerful social network that you can rely on, that can rely on you, people you can call and relate to and be open and honest and vulnerable with people. And by the way, these groups will change over the course of your life. It's not necessarily you need to have friends from high school. In fact, one of the other interesting things from the study is that those that had the strongest social networks at work ended up having the strongest social networks post-retirement. Interesting. Interesting. So I'd say those are probably my two favorites, but if we had a couple hours, we can go through all 10 of them.
No, absolutely. And Scott, I have to ask you because once again, you obviously have made it to the top in business and you also excelled and currently excel in athletics. But when you talk about social networks and finding that balance between everything, how do you do that?
So I think I've learned over time, and I wasn't always good at it. Like all of us, we get better as time goes on. To prioritize. Now you're going to force me back into one of the other principles. So whether you like it or not, you're getting a third principle, which is
Perfect.
minutes matter. Minutes matter is one of the principles that. So it is not intended to teach you how to get more minutes in your day, because by the way, we all have the same number of minutes, nor is it intended to show you how to be more efficient. So it's not an efficiency tool. It's a perspective tool. And here's the perspective, what I explain to people. When you're born, you have about 42 million minutes ahead of you. Plus or minus, you're going to live about 80 years. So you have 42 million minutes. I don't know the exact breakdown of your audience, but I'm just going to guess to make my life easy. Most of them are plus or minus 40 years old. I'm doing this to make my math easy. If you're 40 years old, you're halfway through. You're down to 21 million minutes. You're going to sleep about a third of those. You're down to 14 million minutes. The final years of your life just invariably will likely be not as productive, not as easy to do things. You're probably going to lose a million or two there. You're down to 12 million minutes. How are you going to use those minutes? And the symbol I give people and the key takeaway is I want you to picture a barrel. For me, it's a wine barrel. You picture whatever barrel you like. And in that barrel is your remaining minutes in life. Because they're precious, I picture them, and I do this all the time, as gold coins. So today, I have made a proactive, deliberate decision to join you on your podcast, and I'm so grateful to be invited. But to do that, I needed to dip into the barrel and pull out about 60 to 70 gold coins and think about how I'm using those gold coins. And the key message here, or the takeaway, two of them. One, we have no idea how many gold coins are in that barrel. There could be 5 left. There could be 5 million left. We generally go through life figuring that barrel is, I don't know, there's lots in there. It's an unlimited supply. It's not. And two, we all have leaks in our barrel, some bigger than others, but we all get to the end of the day, the week, the month. We're like, oh my God, I've done so much. I'm chasing, I don't even know what I did. What I want people to do is be very thoughtful, deliberate, and proactive in how they use their minutes, which means saying no to a lot of things. It means prioritizing what's important to you. And there's a trade-off, right? So I don't make judgments on how you use your minutes, nor can I help guide you on what's best. You may choose that your work is most important to you. You love your work, you're passionate about your work, and you'd rather do that than spend time with your family. That's fine. That's wonderful. That's your choice. That's not my choice. It's your choice. What I want people to think about is don't just get to the end of the month and be like, I can't keep up at work. I can't keep up with my family. I have no time to exercise. No, you do. You just have to make proactive, deliberate choices on how you use those gold coins.
No, that's wonderful. And, as we move forward and transition into, when I was doing some research, I understand you are a workplace culture advocate. And I'm curious when that started. Was it maybe when you were writing the book? Was it over time, or maybe when you reached the pinnacle in business that you would become a workplace culture advocate?
So I think it ties to just my life philosophy. I want to be with people that I like. I want to be with people that are hopefully more positive. I want to be with people that whether it's at work, whether it's at social events, I want to surround myself with really good people. So I've grown up and worked in different cultures and experienced different things. And then when I had a chance to help set the tone for the culture as I rose into the C-suite, I made it a top priority. There was no doubt about it. When my partner and I founded Invesque, we talked about that before, we really focused on and emphasized on culture. Right now, I'm working with another company called Spectra. We emphasize and focus on culture. So what does that mean? What that means is we prioritize, well, first of all, we help define the culture. So it needs to be clear to people. If people can't tell you what the company is about, what it stands for, who works there, then there really isn't the strong culture. So one, you have to define it. Two, you then have to use that culture as a lens for all your decisions. Does this person belong on the team or not? Do you hire this person or not? Do you partner with third-party providers, people that aren't part of your company, because they fit your culture or not? So I made that a priority, and I'm really proud of it. When at Invesque, we were named one of the best places to work. That company's based in Indiana, so one of the best places to work in Indiana for 5 years in a row, and that's certainly something I'm very proud of.
That is wonderful. And I'm just curious in general, the difference between, say, the past decade, fast forwarding to now, like what are things that you have seen change in the workplace? And that could be for positive or negative, and how maybe if it was negative, you've resolved that.
I'd say there's no doubt the influence of COVID, the work from home, the hybrid lifestyle has changed the work environment. I think COVID was a wonderful wake up call, an aha moment for a lot of people to self reflect. So it sort of ties to what I was talking about before in minutes matter, how you choose to use your minutes. I think in a pre COVID era, people are like, that's fine. I'm happy to commute an hour and a half each way, 3 hours round trip and commit to my company 7 days a week. I'm fine with working nights and weekends. I'm fine with building a career. And by the way, that's great. Like I did that for a long time. I worked on Wall Street. I sold my soul, and I to leave the office, forget about 7 days a week. It was 14 days a week kind of thing. That's fine. But I think COVID helped people open their eyes, and I opened my eyes pre-COVID as I matured and I got to a different stage of my life and realized, you know what?
Mhm.
Maybe I don't want to work nights. Maybe I don't want to work weekends. Maybe I don't want to commute 3 hours round trip. Maybe I don't want to be part of an organization that doesn't trust and respect me. So I found COVID to be what I call an aha moment, an eye opening, a self reflection, not just in the workplace. I think in general, people are like, how am I using those precious gold coins?
That's a good point. And when we talk about just employees in any type of organization or company, what types of just like daily things that they could do to make the culture healthier and happier just by one person, the impact a person could have?
Well, I think the person one has to be bought into that culture because every culture is not right for everyone. There isn't a good and bad culture in well, that's not true. There are bad cultures, but there are shades of gray along the spectrum of good cultures. And there are a lot of awesome cultures that just aren't right for me. For example, there are people that want to be in a super fast paced, high energy, 7 day a week, trying to solve the world's problems. That's great. I'm not into the 7 day a week anymore. I did that for a while, and that culture wouldn't be right for me. Doesn't mean it's a bad culture. So I think cultural fit needs to be really important. And then surrounding yourself with people that you like to work with, people that, we spend a lot of time in the work environment. And if we don't like our, the number one reason people leave jobs is their supervisor. It's not compensation. It's not opportunity. It's their supervisor. It's the number one reason. And that's been demonstrated over and over again. So if you don't like the person you're working for, you don't like the person you're working with, you don't like the people that are working for you, you're not in the right environment. Find the right environment for you. Again, it gets back to the book's theme. Life's too short. Like, why spend time? And this now, I'm circling back and trying to tie all this together, ties to your question about what's changed in the workplace. I think more people are questioning that. Is this the right fit for me? Is this what I want to do with my life? Is this where I want to use my precious gold coins?
That's such a good point. Just like reflecting, I think you're so right. The companies that I worked for, thankfully, two amazing managers. It was when I was in pharmaceutical sales, and I think for me, something that really stood out is the self motivation that I have from their perspective. They never micromanaged, and I think that stands out significantly because I was able to do my job. And in sales, of course, you have sales calls with your manager, but it was always so much fun. I could remember so many great times going into those offices, having those calls. I mean, I'm a person, I like to have fun, but to laugh at myself sometimes. Like I remember several times, but we would come out of these offices and like, I don't know, I would say something that, if it didn't make sense or it didn't resonate or something, we would just laugh about it. And like, of course, how could you perfect that? How could you do better next time? But I just have really positive thoughts about when in fact you do have a good manager that kind of looks at you as an individual and what your needs are. And for me in particular, I would definitely do my work. That wasn't the problem. It wasn't so much like the intrinsic like motivation that was needed. It was just the fact like my manager was incredible by not micromanaging me. And so I'm curious, Scott, you, like I said, you've reached the top, and I mean, you have been in multiple different areas: corporate finance, accounting, entrepreneurship, and law, as well as M&A. So what is next for Scott?
So right now I'm really focused on this life is too short guy journey. I'm having the
Mhm.
time of my life. I'm really enjoying it. I feel like I'm having a positive impact on the world. And I don't say that lightly. So
Mhm.
I'd like to continue to do this. I'd like to continue to spread the message. I'd like to speak. I am doing a decent amount of speaking now, but I'd love to be on stages across the country sharing this message. Maybe I'll write another book, and we'll see. Right now I'm really focused on the life is too short guy, but I sort of view my life as right now as a portfolio of opportunities, and I'm doing some stuff with a couple of different companies and doing some consulting and doing the speaking, and I'm at the point in my life and in my career where, as I said at the outset, I'm an empty nester, so my wife and I have considerable flexibility, which is wonderful, and that's really important to us. But there's so many more things I want to do. I feel like I'm just sort of, I don't know if I'd say getting started. That would be an exaggeration, but I'm not winding down. I'm not, as people think about, how many more years do I have to work and when am I retiring? And if I can do this for 5 more years, I'm good. I never have that perspective. I don't know if I have enough time left to get everything done is really more my perspective. And there's so many more things I want to do.
No, that's great. And you mentioned, of course, perhaps a second book. So have you even thought of potentially what that could be? Is it The Life is Too Short Guy Part 2, or is it something totally different?
I don't know. One of the things I've toyed around with a little bit is trying to bring the life is too short guy closer to the business realm. So I very deliberately did not make the first book a business book. I didn't want it to be a business book. But I thought about, could you bring, because all the principles are broadly applicable. If you look at them, they belong in every workplace culture. So I
Mhm.
thought about maybe a business parable that would illustrate the principles of Litzig as a possible idea. I think I'll stay in this genre. How exactly I'll play it, I don't know. But I've lived my life this way in terms of a focus on positivity and energy and happiness and making the most of life. So I feel like that's my gift. I feel like that's the message I want to spread, and there's just different methods to do that.
No, that's absolutely great. And, as we move forward, I want to speak about your athletic journey. So you have completed an Ironman and over 15 marathons. So Scott, where did this journey begin, and maybe perhaps what influenced you to take up endurance sports?
So I always was athletic as a kid, not necessarily the best athlete, let me be clear, but I always enjoyed athletics. Played soccer and ran track and wrestled, and then followed college sports a lot. Love college
Mhm.
sports; it's one of my passions. And then I'd say about it was again that on my to do list, on my bucket list, on my passion list. Someday I'm going to run a marathon. And about, I don't know, 15 or 16 years ago, I was like, yep, no time like the present. Why don't I apply and see if I can get into the New York City Marathon? I literally had no idea kind of what the process was, but I was like, you know what? It was a fairly inexpensive fee. Let's apply and see what happens. Of course, by the time I got accepted, my wife was incredibly pregnant with our second child. And she was like, you're going to do what? Um, but anyway, the first marathon, and I tell a great story in the book about a random act of kindness around that marathon,
Mhm.
was a I want to say a wonderful experience. It's peaks and valleys, but it was enough to hook me that once I did the first one, I then just started, a second one, a third one. I had hoped sort of in a bit of a stretch, actually more in a bit of a stretch, but I had hoped to qualify for the Boston Marathon when I ran my first one. Let's just say it didn't end that well. So then I came back for second, and again I didn't qualify. Then I came back for third, and I did qualify, and then I was really bit. Then I ran Boston, and it just sort of became a part of my life. It became habitual. It became every year. My wife and I would kind of plan, where do we want to go, and we did the Disney Marathon where we brought the kids, and some other fun and interesting ones, and then I don't know, I guess probably about 7 or 8 years into that journey, I was like, all right, I need to shake this up. It's a lot of running, which I love. I mean, it really is fun for me. And I started exploring triathlons and did a couple of small like sprints and Olympic distances, and then tried a half Ironman. Thought it would be pretty cool, and it was. Then probably took a couple of years off, and I was like, and I talked for a while about someday I'm going to do an Ironman, someday I'm going to do an Ironman, someday I'm going to do an Ironman. And my wife joked often about, yes, when we're divorced, you'll do an Ironman. But she was 100% supportive. I finally committed about 10 years ago, and did did the Lake Placid Ironman about a decade ago, and then I went back to running, did some marathons, and last year I was like, I miss it. So I signed up for the Happy Valley Half Ironman, which is out in Pennsylvania. My daughter is at Penn State, and I was like, oh, what a great opportunity to kind of hook me back, have a connection. So I did that this past June, a couple months ago, and it was a lot of fun. We'll see what's next. I'm sort of playing with, what could be another challenge, something different, something fun, something interesting. I still cycle a lot, I still run a lot, but I'm not currently training for anything in particular.
No, that's incredible. Like I can't even wrap my mind around a marathon, let alone a triathlon. Being a former gymnast, Scott, a minute 30 was our time frame. A minute and 30 seconds for the balance beam, for floor, and of course vault is super quick. So to think of endurance sports, I mean, I can't even imagine it. And so my question to you, as you talk about going from marathons and I wanted to get back into triathlons, what was your journey like? Did you pick up a coach maybe when you returned back to triathlons? Did you get a nutritionist? Like, what was your method?
So I've worked with different coaches and different nutritionists. I would say that I was much more serious early on in the, when I signed up for New York, probably 15-ish years ago. I've lost track. I had no idea what I was doing and then once I started training, once I got in, I'm like, all right, I'm all in. Let's do this. I hired a coach and I got carried away. I really got too crazy about it, which ties to the story that I tell in the book about how I had unreasonable expectations, went out too fast, and the story didn't end incredibly well, though it was a beautiful story of a random act of kindness. If we have time, I'd be happy to circle back on that. And then for a while, I trained really hard and took it very serious. Like you said, coaches and nutritionists and so on and so forth. I will tell you, and I think this is an important reflection on my life is too short guy philosophy and where I am in my life. So when I committed to this half Ironman, let's see, I did it this June. I'd say probably a year and a half ago. So last June, I committed 100% to myself and to my wife. I'm not getting carried away this time. This one is about going out and having fun. I'm going to work. I'm going to train. I'm going to give it my best shot. But in the past, I had very specific training and nutrition, and I'd never miss a workout. I mean, there could be a thunderstorm. Like, my wife used to get texts and emails from people around town saying, your husband is out in a thunderstorm. Do you think that's a great idea? This time, I very much went in with, let's just have some fun. I had a coach who was a good friend of mine and he knew it too. I said, look, Tony, here's the thing. This journey is about completing it and having fun. And when I went out this past June, it was the most fun race I ever had. It wasn't the best race I ever had, but I literally, the week leading up, I didn't have that anxiety or that concern that I normally have. The night before, I slept well. The day of the race, that I waved to, hey, how are you? Thanks for coming. Oh, so good to see you. I'm waving to people from the bike. I'm running by, slapping people high five. It was hard. I came across the line in a decent amount of pain. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say agony. That was a different level of training. So I gave it my best. I didn't just go out and lollygag around, but it had such a different perspective. I didn't have here's the time. I'd always have here's my goal time. If I'm really good, I'll get here. And I didn't have that in mind at all. This was about having fun. I had a lot of fun.
And I think that ties back to what you've been speaking about and some of the other conversations, but how focusing on the journey more so than that destination of, just like you were saying about the book, like you never thought all these awards would come. That's not what you were focused on, but just enjoying writing your first book. And so I think that's an excellent takeaway. And do you have any other lessons, and that could be within like physically of sport, like when you were going through these marathons and triathlons, but that really stood out as you look back? Like, what lesson or lessons did you learn?
Oh boy, there's a lot. I think the key ones, there's no doubt that I was disciplined and committed to training. I think over time I did learn about backing off that and having more fun. I think I learned a lot about balancing my time in terms of the time commitment to train versus working versus family time and the sacrifices you have to make. Look, I said before, and I gave the example that there's some people that will make a proactive, deliberate choice that they want to work and not be with their family. I made a proactive, deliberate choice that was right for me at the time when I trained for my Ironman, that this was going to cost me family time. I knew that. Like it was more important to me to bike and run and swim than it was to watch TV with the kids and the family. And that was a proactive, deliberate choice. So I think as I went through this journey, there are choices that are made along the way about prioritizing and how you use those precious gold coins. What else would I say? Those are probably the big ones.
No, that's fantastic. And was there any lesson that you learned from the athletic journey that you actually transferred over into your business?
I don't think so. I think they're all interconnected. And it's interesting because someone asked me that question when I was speaking yesterday, a very similar question about I think he phrased it as sort of the time and energy commitment you bring to sports, do you bring that back to the office? And I said, it's I don't sort of bucket it that way, like a lesson learned from sport goes to the office or a lesson learned at the office goes to home. Like sure. I live an interconnected life. I live a life where there's an ecosystem of different players and different activities and events going on in my life. And I think a lot of the principles are broadly applicable when you look at the core principles that I talk about. The attitude is everything. Minutes matter. We talked about can't make it alone. All those apply, right? You can't make it alone. Same thing in sports, right? So I found, here's actually a great one that maybe I didn't think about, is that I enjoyed the training journey substantially more when other people were involved. So my wife was bought in. She knew what I was up to. I had a coach that sort of held me accountable. I'd bike with a group of cyclists. At other points in my training, I'd run with a local friend that I really enjoyed. So again, that gets back to can't make it alone. Would I say that I took the can't make it alone that I learned in sport and bring it to the office? No. Would I say that the can't make it alone that I learned at work, I brought it to the family? No. I think these principles are all interconnected.
That's a good point. No, absolutely. And, the one thing, it kept coming up, but I want to hear about it. What was that random act of kindness during the race that occurred?
So it's so one of the principles that I talk about, this is great because you're helping me weave through all the principles. One of the principles is called little things make a big difference. Little things make a big difference. And the point there is there's such small things you can do to change your life and those around you. So if I were to write a book or give you a philosophy where you have to do 100 things or you have to do some really hard things, you'll be done as soon as the end of the discussion. If I tell you little things make a big difference, like smile a little bit more often, like celebrate small wins, like random acts of kindness, you're like, yeah, I could do that. In fact, I love when I tell people smile and they're like, so this is my favorite one. When I speak to groups, I literally put up on the screen smile and I just leave it there. I literally just leave it there. And I watch through them. It happens 100% of the time where people are like,
what's going on?
They don't know. They're like, should I smile? I guess I should smile. Wait, are other people smiling? And then I say, look, that's the point, is that if you think deliberately about smiling more often, there are chemicals in the brain that create a greater level of happiness for you and those around you. There's a ripple effect. Smile. Smile when you're sitting here. Smile when you get in your car. Smile when you wake up in the morning. Smile when you're in the shower. Just think about smiling. That's small. Small act unto itself will help you live a better life and those around you. One of the points, anyway, to get back to your question is random act of kindness. So, as I said before, I signed up for the New York City Marathon, and I had no idea what I was doing. I went online. I'm like, oh, look, you fill out this little form, and you send them a check. And I think that was the time you still sent checks. So one of the things you have to do for a larger marathon is you have to project your finishing time, so that way they line you up appropriately. So I had no idea. I did a little bit of research. I'd never run a half marathon. I have no idea. I'm like, pretty good shape. I guess I'm athletic, so I don't know. How about 4 hours? Let's try 4 hours. So I write down 4 hours and I submit it. I then, as I said to you before, got carried away. I hired a coach and just went from, I guess, something that was supposed to be a hobby to something that became an obsession again. It's part of my personality. And I did a bunch of races and I did a half marathon. And in that half marathon, I ran a 1:28 half marathon. So all of a sudden, I'm like, look at me. Oh my God. 4 hours. Who is that guy? 4 hours. I'm a 3 hour marathoner. And then I look at the Boston qualifying times, which I think was 3:10 at the time. I'm like, I'm in. I'm chasing 3 hours. Don't worry. The story does not end this well. So don't get too excited, because anyone that's listening now that's a marathon runner is like, oh, I know where this is going. Yep. That's where it went. So I show up at Jacob Javits the day before the race. Jacob Javits is the convention center in New York, where you register, you get your packet with your shirt and your number. And I proudly walk in holding my race results from the half marathon I ran. And I go up to this lovely older woman, and I'm like, I want to check in. But before I get my number, I signed up for 4 hours. So I'm so sorry with the 4 hour people, but I ran a 1:28. So I think I'm going to break 3 hours. I need to line up with the 3 hour people. And she's like, son, there's nothing I could do. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm chasing Boston 3 hours. I got to line up with the 3 hour people. She's like, I don't know what to tell you. So now I start being maybe a little bit of a jerk. I don't know. I'm like, well, there are thousands of people here. I know you can't help me, but someone here can help me. She's like, go in that room over there. Maybe they can help you. So I walk over there, and I go through the door, and there's this like tall, lanky, clearly runner standing in there. And I'm about to tell him, I'm like, look, I ran a 1:28, I think. And he could care less. He's like, yeah, just give me your bib. He stamps my bib with a Statue of Liberty stamp, puts a green sticker on it. He's like, you can line up with the elite running teams. There are teams that do this, and they line up, and you could just go line up with them. So I show up on race day, and I'm flying high. First marathon. Again, anyone's run a marathon is like sensing now, oh boy, I know what happened here. I line up about 100 feet behind the pros. So I could probably spit on the pros if I wanted to. I didn't want to, but I probably could have. I line up shortly behind them. The gun goes off. My first marathon, I take off the Verrazano Bridge, and I run like a 6:30 first mile. And I'm like, oh my God, look at me. 3 hours. I'm going to crush 3 hours. Well, I get to 8 or 10 miles, and I'm slowing down, and I'm like, ooh, I'm starting to feel it. I get to mile 13, and I hear that little old lady. Remember the one from the Javits Center saying, I told you not to go out with the 3 hour runners. Well, by the time I got to Central Park, I collapsed. I had nothing left in me. I was completely cramped up, seized up. I'm on the ground. My calf muscle is on top of my shin bone. I didn't know how that was physically possible. It had spun around the outside of my leg. It's by my shin bone. It is cramping. I'm on the ground crying. I'm dying. And a guy comes up and taps me on the back.
Oh my.
You okay? And I don't even know what to say. I grunt. What do you mean, am I okay? I feel like I'm going to die. He comes around the front of me, and I've now run 24 miles. I have 2 miles to go. And he literally comes down to my eye level. He looks at me. He's like, you're just cramping. We can do this. And he put his arms under my disgusting armpits and helped lift me up. And he and I finished those last 2 miles together. I have no idea who he is. Never met him before. Never met him again. Don't even know what he looks like. But talk about the ultimate random act of kindness. But for that, I probably wouldn't have finished the race and maybe never run a marathon again. That's the power of little things make a big difference.
That is incredible. You are a fantastic storyteller, I must say. Like, you had me hooked on this story the whole time. It reminds me, I had actually, I spoke about this in another podcast, but what you're talking about with the perceived expectation of what you think you could achieve. Well, in high school, this is obviously nowhere near marathon or endurance training, but I had transitioned out of gymnastics and I went into track and field. And so that first year, I'll never forget it. I'm built for more sprinting. So like the 4x1, just the straight 100. And my coach, we had probably ran, I can't remember exactly, but maybe some 400s in practice. But I remember specifically, he had approached me and he goes, I want you to run the 400. He goes, in the next race, he goes, so I could see your time, of course, like under adrenaline. And so I'm like, okay, like really, how hard could this be? It's one lap, right? And I came out like just full board sprinting, like 100-meter dash. Didn't even understand the concept of pacing oneself. Okay. And so I'm like coming around like the third bend, so to speak. I just had that straightaway. I went from like first to last immediately. I could not, Scott, I literally could not even walk the last like straight away, but I was
Learned.
determined. And I remember people were like, no, you don't have to like finish. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm going to finish this. And I told my coach after, I was like, do not ever put me in that 400 again. I am meant for straight sprinting. Just
That
that
was the end of your middle distance career.
That's right. That's right. But it just reminded me, of course, when you had mentioned that. But, as we transition into more of just life and those life lessons, you, of course, as you mentioned before, you had married your high school sweetheart, Jen, and then you have two daughters. And so I'm just curious, watching you from your daughter's perspective, with business, achieving the ultimate success, as well as in athletics, just of course, as we just get off of this topic, running 15 marathons and a Ironman. What do you hope as far as lessons to be learned that maybe have already been instilled in your daughters, or currently you just hope in the future that they will learn from your experience and watching you throughout the years?
So I think it's the principles that we talked about, right? These principles reflect my life philosophy. They will buy into all of them, and I don't expect anybody to. When I even speak with you and I speak with others, there's some that resonate and some that are like, yeah, that's just not me, and that's fine. But I would hope that part of my legacy, not just to my daughters, but to anybody I speak to, is for them to reflect on some of the things I've talked about: the power of positivity, choose your attitude and own it, those types of principles, the can't make it alone principle, and just live that kind of life. I'm truly hoping that they, and sort of anyone I meet, can live a happier life, can embrace life for what it's meant to be, or create that opportunity for themselves. I really hope people understand the urgency, meaning
Mhm.
none of us last forever, and we can talk about, yes, at some point I'm going to fill in the blank, start a business, meet a person, move to a new country, start a new hobby. Well, that day may never come. So today's your day. And I hope that they and others embrace the urgency of make today the best day ever. I mean, that's the tagline on the book. It's the life is too short, guys. Strategies to make every day the best day ever. Go out and try to make every day the best day ever.
No, I really like that. And I think that that kind of ties into something I've been thinking a lot about lately is um, helping people take that jump to discover their dreams and brought to reality. Just to your point, like not putting things off to that next day, and to not be afraid to really jump in and go after your goals. Because to your point, like I always think about what is my perception going to be 5 years out if I reflect back. If I didn't go for something, would I
Yep.
regret it? And I think that's the way I have always lived my life. And I would have to pay like tribute 100% to my father, but then also to just sport and the lessons sport teaches, specifically, of course, just with my experience with gymnastics most of my life, but really taking chances. Anytime in gymnastics, my coach would always tell me, okay, I think you're ready to do this skill. Like, go ahead and try it. I always trusted him, but I never was truly fearful. And that could have been, due to age. I was like 12 years old. So I would do anything, of course. Didn't have that fear that was setting in quite yet. But nevertheless, just really going after things and taking chances. And I think that lesson has also translated over into my professional career. And that is the one thing when you talk about like never put something off until tomorrow because you don't know if tomorrow's going to be there. I just think that's such a great piece of advice, Scott. And to round out this particular conversation, do you have a positive quote or a positive phrase that you would like to share with the Plenty of Positivity community?
So one of my favorite quotes, which I talk about in the book, is from a great literary scholar: "From there to here, from here to there, funny things are everywhere." Good old Dr. Seuss. I think you got to laugh every day. You mentioned it before about the power of humor, and that's one of the other principles. I mean, I think we've practically covered all the other principles, but one of the principles I literally call funny things are everywhere. Laugh every day. Laugh at yourself. Laugh at the world around you, regardless of the situation. And I give examples in the book of a funny situation that I dealt with at my own dad's funeral. So laugh every day, laugh often. From there to here, from here to there, funny things are everywhere.
I really, really like that, Scott. And that is an excellent way to round out this conversation. I truly want to thank you for being on this podcast, Scott, and sharing all your wisdom and knowledge, and of course, positivity. So thank you once again, Scott. And I wish you the absolute best.
Thank you so much.